What's up, FCA teammates? Tristan here. Hope all of you are well. Just reaching out to provide you with a video recap of all that has happened within the past year and all that is to come within this next year of FCA Akron. So with that in mind, if we would all just rewind in our minds just a year ago today, and we will all know that we were right smack dab in the middle of COVID during that time, and it was a really challenging time in terms of ministry because the relational in-person piece was missing, and that was really tough. With that said, FCA did pivot and transition a lot of our ministry activities online. But many of you know that it's just not the same. And I think you guys are probably just as tired as me of staring at Zoom now that we're a year and a half into this COVID thing. But thankfully, as we kind of turned toward the spring and got into March, things opened up a little bit more. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a second. But we were able, as the fall kicked off last year, to continue with our CVCA Bible project. And so within that, we provide 200 FCA athletes' Bibles to the CVCA football team so that they can hand them out to their opponents after each of their home games. They're all standing on the 50-yard line. The CVCA captains get up and tell the other team what Jesus means to them. And then each player finds an opposing player and hands them an FCA athletes' Bible. It's a really, really cool scene. So we were able to continue that last year as well. I also was able, as the chaplain for the University of Akron football team, to travel with the football team, which was nice. I had to be tested for COVID twice a week to make it happen. But it was good because I got to be at all of the games. I got to be on the sidelines. I got to do the chapel services before the games and continue to serve the team in that way. I was restricted from some other activities like practice and some team meals and things of that nature. And so building relationships was still quite difficult last fall, but was able to continue to at least serve those student athletes that I have already been serving there within the football team. And our University of Akron multi-sport huddle, right, which meets every Thursday, usually on campus at the University of Akron. It includes football players, but also women's lacrosse players and some track and field athletes as well. That huddle met every single week, even in the midst of COVID. We just met via Zoom for the whole fall and all the way into March. And then in March, we started to meet at the Griffin household for the last couple of months of the semester. We would be able to break bread with our athletes, hang out with them. And this group was small but mighty this year. COVID really cut our numbers way down. But because of that, we were able to dive deeper into relationship, deeper into conversation. And I really feel like we walked out of this year with a strong core group of leaders that we'll be able to take into next year in terms of what it looks like for the FCA multi-sport huddle. Another thing on that topic, we had a board member, Krista Clark, step up to be the women's sports chaplain. And I'm so proud of Krista because she knocked that out of the park, really went out of her way to get to know our female athletes in our huddle to the point of taking them individually to lunch or church or whatever it might be, just really integrating them into her life and her integrating into their life. And I tried to do the same thing with the football players. And so even to the point of we had some lacrosse girls babysit our children, and that's what we got into FCA for, right, was the child care. So we were able to pull that off as well. But really our goal there at the University of Akron is what I call life-on-life ministry, right? So we want to integrate our lives into the lives of those athletes, and we want them to integrate into ours, right? We want our home to be their home. We want them to feel comfortable reaching out and saying, hey, can I come over for the afternoon? Just want to hang out, get out of the dorms, get a home-cooked meal, things of that nature. So we're really working toward that, and we've got some really key relationships that are starting to develop into that, which is awesome. Another thing that launched as of last year, and really it began in October last year, was God planted the seed of launching FCA's All Abilities initiatives here in Akron in my heart. And really what happened there was I was at FCA meetings down in Atlanta when a gentleman there was talking about FCA's All Abilities initiatives, and he was saying they're pretty much non-existent at this point, but we're trying to figure out what it looks like. And then he said, but he was at a sports camp for children with special needs on the West Coast a couple of years ago, and he was just blown away by how one of the athletes was so excited to be called an athlete. And man, this just put me in tears. I was losing it because it spoke so deeply to mine and Melanie's experience with Scout and her having a disability. We want so badly as parents to just have our children included, right? And we want them to have the fun that everybody else is getting to have. And so walked away from that meeting saying, man, we're going to make an all abilities camp happen here in Akron. We'll be the first to do it throughout the world for FCA, and we're going to try and set the bar high for others to really do it and do it well throughout the rest of the world as well. So we moved toward that in October all the way through. We picked up to the point to where we had 60 different people on 11 different committees planning this event. And then we got to the day of execution, which was July 9th and 10th of this past summer. And we had 71 campers. We had 180 volunteers. So about 250 people all on a couple of football fields, engaging in 4 different sports. So we had football, we had soccer, we had softball, and we had just kind of a general fitness type of station. We had campers all with disabilities, ages 2 to 27. And it was that 2-day camp, which was just really, really special. And we had a young man, we had an awards banquet thereafter, and there was a young man with Down syndrome who was actually a coach at camp who got up and shared his testimony at the awards banquet as well. And it was just a time full of so many special experiences and times. I suppose one story I'll share with you, and this comes from one of my board members, Jeff Sitz. Jeff was in a small group. We would huddle up in small groups after the sports activities at each day at this camp, and we would talk about the biblical lesson that was presented to the whole group of campers. And so Jeff was in one of these small groups, and there was a young lady, I don't know what her disability was, but who stood up as the presenter, the moderator was kind of talking about Jesus and the gospel and really trying to hammer home that point. She stood up and just shared for about 10 minutes about what Jesus meant to her. And Jeff said this was the most pure, beautiful, just innocent presentation of Christ in the life of another human being that he's ever seen in his life. And I've been saying this about this camp ever since we started to plan it. Sometimes we can see God so much more clearly through people with disabilities than we can through typically abled people. And so I think Jeff just got a small piece of that, and I'm sure all the others in that group did too. And that's kind of the sneaky part of this camp, right? All of these volunteers, 180 of them, come to camp thinking they're going to love on these campers. And really, at the end of the day, man, the amount of love coming their way from the campers is what can be life-changing for those volunteers. And so it was just a really cool experience and something that will continue in the future as well. And I'll speak into that a little bit more in just a moment. The last thing that I want to touch on from this past fiscal year would be our Coaches Marriage Retreat. And so this is something that's put on by Great Lakes FCA, which is the umbrella under which FCA Akron falls under. And ultimately, this is put on every summer for coaches and their spouses to come for a weekend to a hotel, to let their guard down, to disconnect from all of the other distractions in life, and to pour into their marriage from a biblical standpoint. We do some presentations, we do some small group talks. We had a comedian this year that was the MC, so just kind of a fun time for them to get together, but focus on their marriage on a little bit deeper level through a biblical lens, and also just connect with one another. And so we just did that a couple weeks ago down in Columbus at the Renaissance Hotel. Melanie and I were able to go. We brought Art and Maggie Klatt, which are 2 of our board members who do marriage ministry here locally, with the idea that they might be able to observe that Coaches Marriage Retreat and bring something similar to that back here to Akron in the future. And so we're really hoping that will work out as we move it forward too. So speaking of moving forward though, I just want to continue to paint that picture for you of what FCA Akron's going to look like for this upcoming year. And really the last 3 things that I talked about there regarding the past year will be the 3 things that are at the top of our priority list for this upcoming year. And those things are number 1, the University of Akron. We'll continue to pour into what we've got going on there and build into it. We'll continue to do our Thursday night multi-sport huddle. Like I said, includes football, women's lacrosse, and track and field. I also picked up the role of chaplain for the University of Akron basketball team, men's basketball for this year as well. So we will include them in that group. And we're just really beginning to experience a lot of open doors there at the University of Akron. So we'll continue to develop that out as we move into this next year. Another thing would be the All Abilities initiatives. This is something that's near and dear to mine and Melanie's heart, and it's something that we want to see not only flourish here in Akron, but outside of Akron, in the state of Ohio, in the country, in the world. And so we're really continuing to discuss what that looks like. And really here in Akron, what it's going to look like is we're going to continue to have that large multi-sport camp like we did this year, but we're also going to start putting on some smaller, more focused camps and events for this same constituency. And so, for example, we might, instead of doing the multi-sport camp, or not instead of, but in addition to doing the multi-sport camp, we're going to also provide some more sport-specific camps, like say a basketball camp for maybe 20 to 30 campers, and maybe a tennis camp for a small number of campers who are all in a smaller age range, so that we can start to create communities and families within this large group that we've captured through the multi-sport camp, because we believe that as we continue to drill down and make those groups smaller and smaller, that's where depth of relationship will happen, that's where ministry will happen, and that's where people will feel encouraged in their faith and in their life as we continue to develop this out. So that's the hope with the All Abilities initiatives here locally. And then lastly, we want to be very intentional about developing our coaches ministry this year. Once again, something that's very near and dear to mine and Melanie's heart, both being former college coaches. We know that life. We know the challenges that come with that life, particularly with respect to the marriages that are impacted by that lifestyle and that profession. And so we're going to figure out what it looks like here in Akron to develop a robust coaches ministry. And really, we're just going to be step one. We've done some things in the past that have been kind of one-off things here and there, but we're going to get really intentional about, okay, what's step one that's going to take us to step 2, step 3, step 4, to the point to where we have a flourishing and robust coaches ministry here in the Akron area. And so those are just some things you can keep your eye on as we move it all forward. Thanks so much for your support, number one. Number two, for carving out 12 minutes to watch this video. I'm sorry I couldn't see many of you face to face, but I hope in the near future to hug your necks. Take care, and we'll talk soon.